what a midlife crisis looks like. My midlife crisis. What I wanted to talk about today is what a midlife crisis is not. I just want to say, just because you are having a crisis during midlife does not a midlife crisis make. It really does drive those of us crazy who are truly having a midlife crisis. So let me just tell you why it irritates me. Because I will be talking to somebody and maybe mention midlife crisis because that's my life, or they do, or whatever. And then I get kind of excited that I'm able to talk to somebody who's having a midlife crisis and, maybe have some kind of a connection with someone. And then listen to their story and I soon discover it's not a midlife crisis. It might be a crisis that you're having during midlife, but that doesn't mean it is a midlife crisis. If your marriage gets blown apart during midlife, that is a crisis, but it's not a midlife crisis. Certainly you're going to have reaction and responses to this, and certainly some of your thoughts, ideas, and maybe even some of your values might change, because this is just the kind of thing that happens during a crisis of any age. If you've lost a job you've had for 20, 30 years, that's a crisis. If someone close to you passes away, that's a crisis. But make no mistake, a midlife crisis doesn't happen just because of one of these crises happening to you. I had a number of, crises happen to me over a span of time, and those didn't trigger a midlife crisis. Not any one. It's possible that the multitude did it. I don't know. But I wasn't having a midlife crisis when my mother passed away. What I was going through then was called grief. Losing a job, that's grieving. And everybody does it differently. But it's not a midlife crisis. And yeah, when you have these experiences of some sort of a crisis happening to you, you're going to ask questions like, is this all there is? Or what's the purpose? What's the sense? And things like that. But it's not to the, degree that somebody having a midlife crisis gets that. I experienced the grieving. I experienced, these major life changes. But I didn't just experience them during midlife. When I was younger, I had experiences of the like as well. My marriage was blown apart. I want to say 39. I didn't have a midlife crisis. That was a crisis, but it wasn't a midlife crisis, nor did I think it was. When I actually hit the midlife crisis, I knew this is what was going on. First of all, it made no sense based on the world around me in the previous 6 months to a year, year and a half. It made no sense that things would just shift so suddenly within me. And I've said before, and I know so many of you who are actually having a midlife crisis can relate, all of a sudden I was in a mind that I didn't know. It wasn't crazy. It was just different. I saw things so differently. I viewed things differently. My core values did like an instant change. Instantly. Or at least that's how it felt. Maybe they started changing before and I didn't realize, but all of a sudden it was like I hit a wall. So please, if you are experiencing a crisis and you happen to be in midlife, don't talk about you having a midlife crisis unless you're really having a midlife crisis. And yes, you might feel like doing something drastic like skating out of your life, just packing up and splitting and leaving no forwarding address, changing your phone number so no one in your life can get a hold of you. You might feel like doing some isolating, but with midlife crisis, it's different. And I don't know, I think you just know, or at least I did. I just knew. Like I said, when I found myself in this crisis, there was nothing in my world that explained why. There was no reason it should have happened just then. I didn't have something happen just then, or even within a month or two before. it had been, I want to say, a couple of years since anything big really happened. Well, no, I guess if you consider the job burning to the ground as big, then it would have still have been over a year. But even at that, you know, I loved that job and it burned to the ground, but I only had it for like a little over a year. So I don't think that would have made for a crisis. Just because your marriage has been blown apart, just because your career was just flushed down the toilet, just because you just lost somebody very, very close to you, does not mean you hit a midlife crisis. Oh, and just because you start questioning what else can you do with your life and saying that you're a little bit bored and you need some changes, that doesn't make a midlife crisis either. There's a whole lot of things that converge all at once. That is a midlife crisis. And sometimes, yes, it does happen during the course of some crisis event happening in your life. Maybe a crisis event might trigger it for some people. I'm not discounting that possibility. But if that's all that has happened, then you're probably not in a midlife crisis. Things inside you just shift. I could almost feel it physically when it happened. It was just bang, and I'm looking around me going, what am I doing? Why am I here? Why do I have all this stuff? I didn't want any of it. And it's not that I didn't want anything in my life. I loved the people in my life. I didn't want to be away from my kids, my grandkids, my friends. These were all wonderful things that I had going on in my life. I didn't want to leave that, but God, I had to go. And I don't feel like I lost any of that either. Yeah, there's a lot of miles between us now, but I still have a relationship with so many of those people. My kids I hear from on quite the regular basis. Just because something blows apart, one area of your life blows apart. The midlife crisis is where all areas of your life are blown apart. It affected my relationships and my life with my friends. It affected my life with my family. It affected my life at home. It affected me, major impact on me in all areas of my life. And some people thought that I was depressed, but I knew I wasn't depressed. I mean, you kind of feel the difference. And I'm not saying that you don't tend to feel depressed sometimes in a midlife crisis. I know a lot of people do. I don't get depressed. I get flat. I don't know if that makes sense to you. I just get flat. It's not like emotionless. The emotions are there. I know they're there. I just don't actually feel them. I just know they're there. I just wanted to cover that because when you are in a midlife crisis and then you think you're talking to somebody else who's in a midlife crisis, it gets a little exciting. The thought that you're now going to be able to talk to somebody and maybe connect with somebody who might understand at least some of it, and at least to some degree, only to discover they're not having a midlife crisis. They're having a crisis. So there it is, my video for today. Maybe some people will like this video. Maybe this video will start to get thumbs down. But that's my thoughts. So anyways, pop any comments you want in the comment section below. I do respond. Click share. If you have somebody, if you know somebody who is talking about them being in a midlife crisis and you know it's only because of some particular event that happened and it's not really a midlife crisis, maybe share the video with them. Of course, it might piss them off. Maybe you don't want to rock about. I don't know. But click like or dislike. Click subscribe. Follow me along on this midlife crisis journey. And see if I survive my midlife crisis.